So here we go. Episode 18 of the Stratosphere Lounge, and I had answered this question earlier. We had a little restart issue. We're going to pick it up again. So the question is, what does Romney do on day one of his presidency? That question comes from Josh Barnes. And Josh, let me tell you this. I think the first thing Mitt Romney needs to do is he needs to get in front of the American people and say, we're going to fix our electoral system. We're going to get rid of these electronic devices. By the way, did you guys see that story where they did somebody decided to do a little voting, little early voting, went down to their polling place, hit the electronic button, and voted for Romney, and the result came back, in order for you to confirm your vote, the votes came back Obama. Isn't that interesting? They said, well, we're going to recalibrate the machines, and we will have it fixed by Election Day. Funny how that works, because when it happened last time, we're getting good internet here. When it happened last time, I recall it was the 2010 elections, and it was in Nevada. And people saying they were voting for whoever was running against Harry Reid, and the votes were coming up as Harry Reid. Isn't that interesting? I don't trust these electronic machines. I don't trust the voter fraud. We all know. You know, I was talking with a friend of mine, and we said, how bad do you think this is going to be? And I said, well, I talked to some people who know something about these things, and they said they probably can't cheat their way past more than a point or two. And everybody went, oh, thank God. So we're at the point now where our electoral system is so corrupt that we actually breathe a sigh of relief saying that, they can get 2 or 3 points at the polls. It's madness. You need to get in front of it. And as I said last week on the Stratosphere Lounge, the one thing you have to do if you're going to be Mitt Romney, get in front of this thing, is you have to simply never, ever, 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 ever cede them the high ground. Don't let them talk about it's racist. It's not racist. Don't let them talk about voter suppression. It's not voter suppression. If you can't get to an ID, if you can't go down to the DMV and spend 2 hours of your life every 8 years or however long IDs last, driver's licenses, I guess, are every 4, right? If you can't go down to the DMV and get an ID, you don't even have to have a card, just get an official ID. If you can't do that once every 4 years, you don't deserve to vote. It's that simple. Voting, as I said before, is a process, not just a right, it's a process. You have to fill out the ballot, you have to submit it, you have to do all these things. So I would say voter fraud is the number one thing that I would have Mitt Romney do on day one. There are anecdotal stories going around that Barack Obama has basically signed something like 900 executive orders, and Bush signed like 22 or something, some number like that. If I'm President Romney in the transition period, I have a look at every single extant executive order that is currently on the books, and I avoid them all. So if there's 900 executive orders, I would, if I'm Mitt Romney, I say Executive Order 1943 hereby invalidates and voids Executive Orders 622, 623, 629, 683, just all of them, boom. If Mitt Romney started out by doing that, I think that would be the moral tone to hit. I think it'd be an impressive thing for him to do. So the one thing we have to say is on the first day of Romney's presidency, which is looking more and more likely, and we'll get to that in a minute, the first thing you do is you've got to set out an achievable agenda, and you've got to try and do it in 100 days. Now, I don't know if we're going to get the Senate, so he needs to say, I will repeal Obamacare the first day it comes to my desk. That may take another Congress. And frankly, if we don't have the votes to do it in the Senate in 2012, I think by 2014, before 2014, it will have sunk in on certain Democratic senators, and we only need 3 or 4, that every single time that in 2010 they passed Obamacare and a lot of Democrats left they left the building. And then in 2012, more Democrats left the building. I think if these guys get the feeling, they've got a lot of seats up in 14, if they get the feeling they're going to get voted out of office, they'll probably flip and vote for its repeal. So I think the Obamacare thing's a real likely thing. And, it's not brilliant new insight on this issue, but it's been said many times, it was said about successful presidents certainly, that a successful president will pick 2 or 3 things at the beginning of his term, and that will be his legacy. He will try to do 2 or 3 things. I think Mitt Romney's going to try and get the economy going and get out of the way. If Mitt Romney can get the government out of the way, that'd be great. I'll say one more thing before we move on this topic. I would say about Obamacare that this would be the first time in history that I'm aware of where we would actually be able to take the other team's points off the board. Instead of us just saying we're going to slow them down or hold them or stop them for a couple years, be a chance to actually regain lost territory. I don't know about you guys, but I really, 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 really like the idea of retaking a hill that we lost. I like the idea of going on offense. I like the idea of getting territory back instead of slowing this onslaught. I really like that a lot. So that would be my answer for you there, Josh. That's what I'd do on Romney's first day. I'd get the electoral system straightened out so we can have fair elections like we used to, and then I would rapidly try to pick an agenda of 3 or 4 things and stick to them and get them going. You got to do it quick, and we have to hold Romney's feet to the fire. I think he's going to be a good president, but if he starts doing this big state liberal thing, we need to say, Mitt, we voted for you, but we also voted to stop Barack Obama, and if you keep doing this, you're going to get a primary challenge, and the Republican Party will split, and we'll have a conservative party or a Tea Party in 2016. That's a deal I'm more than willing to make in order for everybody gets out and vote this time around. This next one isn't really a question. It's just, it was interesting to me and connects to something I've got going on. I'll just come out and read it for you. It's from a gentleman named, I think it's Inlini Driapta. And he says, hello, Mr. Whittle, my name is Vlad. I don't live in the U.S. I don't have a U.S. citizenship, and I don't intend to apply for one. I'm just a Romanian blogger. Oh, I'm sorry, Inlini Driapta is the name of the group. Vlad is the guy who wrote in. And he talks about how much he loves America, talks about how Eastern Europe is watching us, talks about how many people in Eastern Europe, many people who live here who come from Eastern Europe, look at Barack Obama and this cult of personality and all of this socialism, all this government intrusion and everything, and they just go, we've seen this before, and it's not going to end well. And frankly, if America goes under, there's nothing left. The reason this caught my eye was because I do a number of speaking engagements, and I got a chance to, I got an offer to go to Romania by happy coincidence. Somebody wants me to go to Romania. It was going to be in November, middle of November, but they pushed it back, I think, to March or April or May or something of 13. And I was just thrilled to do that because I think the great thing about going to Romania or Poland or anywhere in Eastern Europe and talk about conservative values and Tea Party values, Republican values, I think the great thing about that would be the fact that you'd be starting with a blank piece of paper in terms of these ideas. You'd be dealing with people who had never heard it before, and because of that, I think they'd be much more susceptible to it. I think Romanians and Poles and Eastern Europeans would get the essence of America far better than most of the Americans that live in, certainly than the liberals that live in America. They have much more in common with our founding fathers than modern American liberals do. People in Romania and Poland and Czechoslovakia and all of the Eastern European countries have a lot in common with our founding fathers, not the least of which is they're coming out of struggling against tyranny. And this government is designed, this theory of government is designed to maximize human liberty. And if you've lived under tyranny, maximizing human liberty is a real big deal for you. The great problem in America today, and I don't know how to solve it, I don't think there is a way to solve it, is you become a victim of your own success. When you have 238 or 240 years, pushing 236, whatever the number is, of freedom, you take freedom for granted. And once you take freedom for granted, you start to take the mechanisms of freedom for granted. You don't teach them anymore. And you just simply don't get it. And so you just have to go back to the blank sheet of paper and start over and explain these concepts from the ground up. And I think that's really, really exciting and really fun. And I think they'd really get it. So I'd love to go to Romania and talk about kind of these core principles. And I think people would just so connect to it. And I like the fact that it'd be just fun, the fact that they'd never heard it before, at least not frequently. That'd be an amazing thing. It'd be kind of like, in a way, I don't mean to demean people in Romania. I'm not trying to suggest they don't have televisions or plumbing or electric lighting or anything absurd like that. I'm just saying it would be nice to be able to go and talk to people who really were looking for freedom and looking for some sense of what it's all about, and have that kind of Christmas morning excitement about it, instead of this sort of, bleached out, jaded sort of, founding fathers, tri-corner hats, muskets, I get it. It'd be nice. And I'd look forward to doing it. I'd love to go anywhere. And if you have any interest in bringing me either to Romania or to someplace closer than that, it's contact@billwhittle.net, and you send me an email, and if we can find a way to make it happen, we can make it happen. I go all across the country, and I love doing it. So anyway, thank you very much, Vlad, and thank you for the compliments, and thank you for watching. And you need to know that we're going to win this election, and the American people can be gullible, but they're not, I don't think, completely self-destructive. Certainly that percentage of the population that gets self-destructive seems to get higher and higher. But I think when the American people see what's actually in front of them, they'll fix it. That's why I think we're doing pretty well in this election. So we'll get more election stuff coming up in a minute. Now we get a bunch of questions that I put all together. I try to find questions that are related, and rather than dealing with them individually, I just sort of lump them all together. So all of these have to do with what's going to happen after the election, and they're kind of, some of them are what's going to happen after Romney wins. So let's just talk about the election, briefly, because I'm doing the election hot seat and a bunch of other things. And I don't really need to, I don't think there's a whole lot I can add to the mechanics of the election at this point in the race that I haven't talked about daily on PJTV or whatever the case may be. So I will say this, though. I am very convinced we're going to win this election. I've been saying to myself and my friends through most of the summer that the signs were good, that even though we were down by 4 points, 5 points, 7 points, even 8 points, that kind of thing, that from the time Romney sewed up the nomination, I've been saying that traditionally, historically, the way that all the dynamics work, regardless of whether it's a Republican or a Democratic president, and regardless of who that person is, there are certain mechanics about how an election goes. And the mechanics are, if you are an undecided in October, then, or even in August, then that means you've seen the incumbent, the president, for 3.5 years, and you don't like him enough to say, I'm voting for him again. So you can generally say, and it's generally been true, in fact, I think it's always been true, that as the election gets closer, the undecideds tend to break hard for the challenger, because the fact that they're not in the president's camp. They want somebody different. They just don't know whether or not this person is going to do the job. And as I said on a trifecta, everybody made a big deal about the debates and how great Mitt did. Mitt did great. And the left is going to blame Obama if he loses, and I think he's going to lose. They're going to blame Obama, and they're going to blame especially his first debate performance. And basically what they're going to say is, if Barack Obama just showed up that first day, if he hadn't been so lazy or so tired, we would have won the election. That's utter nonsense. The Democrats made Mitt Romney into a monster. Mitt Romney's not a monster. But even if you take the ad campaign and the various strategies out of it, what you come down to is, as you get close to the election, you have the debates, and the debates, as I said on this trifecta episode, are very simple. Each party has a goal. Doesn't matter whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, doesn't matter the name of the candidate. Here's how it works. If you're the challenger during the debates, you need to convince the American people that you could be the president of the United States. You need to convince them that you've got the command of the issues, you've got the wherewithal, you've got the character, the temperament, the personality to sit in that chair and have the people who are watching you be comfortable with that. And when somebody who I admired for many reasons, like Herman Cain, says he was unaware that China has nuclear weapons, that's a deal breaker for me. And so that's exactly what you're trying like the devil to avoid. And that's why I think Mitt Romney played such a smart game in that final debate, because my understanding is that just pretty much everybody on Mitt Romney's reelection team said, Mitch, you got to pin him to the wall on this Benghazi thing. And Mitch said, no, he's waiting for me to come at him for Benghazi. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to not give him anything to create any scary ads out of. I'm not going to scare anybody during the debate. I'm not going to give him any ammunition to create any scary ads, because Romney basically said, against the advice of everybody on his team, gutsy call, he basically said, I'm winning. I'm not only winning, I'm winning handily. I don't need to throw the bomb. I need to just play smart ball. Just need to control the ball. We're up by 3 touchdowns. There's 2.5 minutes left. We're gonna take the snap. We're gonna wrap our arms around that baby, and if we get a yard or two, fantastic. If we get a breakout run, we get 6, 7 yards, 20 yards, fine. We're not throwing the ball, and we're sure as hell not throwing the ball long, because we don't have to, because we're winning. And I think that made me very angry the night of the debate. Made me feel very, very happy afterwards. I think it's just smart play. So the job of the challenger is to convince the American people that he and his vice president can do the job. And the job of the incumbent is to say, number one, I'm doing a great job. And if he's not doing a great job, then all he's got left is, yeah, I'm doing an awful job, but I'm better than this guy, because this guy doesn't know what he's doing, and he's a flip-flopper, and he's a liar, and he's a mean, bad guy. And the best way to convince people not to vote for you is to scare them that you're a warmonger and you're going to get a nuclear annihilation. They did that to Goldwater. They tried to do it to Reagan. Tried to do it to Romney. He's a strutting, crazed warmonger. He's going to be George W. Bush term 3. And Romney was just determined not to play that game. Romney basically said, I'll give up scoring points on this guy just so that I don't lose points. I'm not going to chuck this election when I'm winning this big. So if that's the case, I think it is the case. If when you get this late into the election, the incumbent's job is to say, we can do this job. I'm sorry, the challenger's job is to say, we can sit in this chair and do as good a job as this guy can. We are capable and qualified to be president and vice president. And the incumbent has to say, no, he's a scary guy and don't dare vote for him. Who do you think won these debates? It doesn't matter by what percentage Romney won the first one or Obama and Biden apparently won the second 3. None of that matters. It doesn't even really matter how you break it down in terms of the economy. What matters is each team has one objective, and did they achieve it? Did Romney convince the American people that he could be president? Or did Obama convince the American people that he was too scary to be president? What do you think? So there goes $400 million of advertising down the drain. Mitt Romney, scary Bane, capital vampire, gone. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy. I'm glad Bill Maher's $1 million went up in smoke in 30 minutes too. And it was fun watching Bill Maher tweet about that debate, because you could tell this $1 million went up in smoke. So that's what I think is going to happen with the election. I think we're going to win this election big. We're tied in Ohio. We're tied in Wisconsin. We're tied in Michigan. We're going to destroy these people. We're going to get them all. None of this momentum goes the other way. It's really a ratchet, I think, at this point, barring something catastrophic from Romney. And I can't even imagine what that is, given that man's character and his squeaky clean background. Barring something catastrophic on Romney's part, I don't think there's anything Obama can do. I think Obama could take us to war with Libya and put troops on the ground and land Marines, and normally the American people would rally around a situation like that, but they'd know here it was just wanton manipulation, and his base is, they're all peaceniks anyway. I don't think there's a thing Obama can do to get it back. And I got to tell you, I've been pulling for various candidates and other candidates during the course of various elections, and needless to say, I have a party and I have a goal, and I want people to win. But never in my life have I ever wanted to see somebody just get hurt politically. I just want to see them get hurt politically. And before we move on, I'll just double tell you that this Romney being up this far this early, we still got 2 weeks to go, 12 days or something, means that Obama's got another 12 days to get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and more bitter, and I'm really happy about that. I'm glad this didn't break 2 days out. I want to see a week of this. And you know what it reminds me of? Reminds me of the details that we're getting about the bin Laden raid, where turns out that we were going to put 2 helicopters in there, and one group of guys was going to land in the courtyard, go over the walls, and work from the ground floor up, and then the other helicopter was going to land on the roof of the compound, put a hunter team down on the roof, and these guys are going to work their way down. And bin Laden was up on the 3rd floor. And in what was, of course, a real mishap. But if you have any sense of revenge bloodlust, which I'm filled with, you realize that that helicopter crashing, especially since it doesn't cost us any lives, didn't cost us the mission, was probably the hand of God. Because if that helicopter hadn't crashed, that team on the roof of the compound would have been on that roof pretty quietly. I mean, you'd hear helicopter blades, but these guys would be down and through that door probably in 20 seconds, 30 seconds. If bin Laden was asleep, I don't know if he'd have time to fully wake up before he went and met his 72 virgins. But because that helicopter crashed, they didn't come down from the roof. They had to go up from the building, from the ground. And that meant that bin Laden had, they say, maybe 30 minutes, a while, maybe 30 to 40 minutes of hearing gunfire out in the courtyard and looking out and seeing helicopters and hearing helicopter blades. And if it's helicopters, it's not Pakistan to come to visit him. And I really, really, really like the idea that Osama bin Laden had 30 minutes to sit in that little room by himself and think about what was coming up the stairs after him. I know that makes me sound mean. I don't care. I don't care. I know that man sat there. I know those people in those buildings had an hour to think about what was going to happen to them. I know those firemen going up those buildings had an hour to think about what was going to happen to them. And I like very much the idea that that Osama bin Laden had 30 minutes to think about who was coming up those stairs. And I also like the fact that the last thing that Osama bin Laden saw on this earth, when he stuck his head out at the door of that third-story building, stuck his head out of the window, sorry, not out of the window, out of the doorway, looked down the hall, and the last thing he saw was 4 American soldiers, I assume it was 4, in a straight line, each one covering different quadrants, and the guy in the lead simply had whatever weapon he had. I bet it was an MP5, silenced MP5, and looks out the window. Oh, here's America. Boom, down. By the way, I don't know how many of you read the details about this, but they were under orders from our president to take him alive if he could. Apparently, Obama said, "Don't risk any of your men. Don't, for God's sakes, don't get somebody killed. But if it turns out he's cowering in a corner and he's unarmed, bring him back. We're going to try him." And from the operational breakdown of what I read, the guys who went into the building shot him on sight. He leaned out the door. A new flash tag. Thank you for hashtag for Twitter. Thanks very much, Searcap. Bill Whittle at Caring. Yeah, Caring, a Caring guy. He stuck his head out the door. He wasn't armed by all accounts. And they just shot him in the head, which means they defied orders, probably direct orders. And I'll bet you anything that those guys got on the helicopter, and on the ride in, the shooters in the kill team, not the support guys, but I'll bet you those shooters sat next to each other very calmly, not emotionally, no pumped up, I bet you just as a professional and calmly as a contractor would talk about whether you needed, an extra 2x4 in that wall there to hold up the drywall, just something absolutely cold-blooded and mechanical. I think these guys said, we're not taking this guy back for trial. No. We've lost a lot of guys here in Afghanistan looking for this guy, and we lost a lot of people in those towers, and Osama bin Laden is not coming back with us alive. And so they shot him on sight, shot him right in the head, and I think that's fantastic. And then they also, again, this is according to a couple of reports, including something I saw on Vanity Fair, once they put him down, they got him in the head, they put him down he's on the ground, obviously, he's dying. And my understanding is whoever was on the actual team, usually that's 4 guys, may have been more or less, they all went into the room where he was lying on the ground, and every single one of these operators just put a mess of rounds into this guy. I bet if you finally count the pictures, SEAL Team 6, I'll bet you anything. If you got the autopsy pictures, I'll bet you that guy's got no less than 12 or 15 holes in him. And I'm so proud of them for that. In fact, when the final thing I'll say about the actual raid, of the limited amount that I know about it, is that that when they came back, President Obama went and said he wanted to talk to him and wanted to meet him. And so he met them all, and he heard the stories and the incredible skill of the helicopter pilot, and saved the lives of the guys when they had to put that thing in. And apparently Obama was talking to the actual shooters and said, "Which one of you did it? Which one of you actually shot bin Laden?" And these 4 guys, or however many guys it were, basically just turned to him and said, Mr. President, with all due respect, we're not going to tell you. Really? No. Not even if you order us, we're not going to tell you. That's between the 4 of us or the 6 of us or however many it was. I think that's fantastic. Anyway, the reason I brought this story up about bin Laden, and the thing is, if you didn't get the connection in the first place, the connection is, I'm glad that Barack Obama has time to see this election coming at him. It's coming up the stairs. That election is coming up the stairs, and every minute that goes by, I think he's aware of the fact more and more that that he is gonna lose this thing. And I want to see him get. I like watching him deflate to his natural size. That's what I'm enjoying about this process. So enough about the election. I think we're going to win it. We'll talk about it next week. Obviously, we'll do Stratosphere Lounge next week, which will be the final one prior to the election, which we don't want to jinx things, but might be the first, last of the Stratosphere Lounge before we can talk about President-elect Romney. And then we can get serious about where Romney will do. So there's 4 people here that ask various versions of the same question. So I'll clump them all together. Richard Ship says, hey, Mr. Whittle, what videos? He doesn't say Mr. Whittle. Didn't mean to put any words in his mouth. He says, what videos will you be doing after the elections? I'm going to take a little time off, and when I say a little time, I mean just a week or 2. And then I'm going to have, listen, if Barack Obama pulls this thing out somehow, I'm going to have a video online in the morning on Wednesday, rallying the troops and telling people, yeah, this is bad, but we're going to survive this too. If Romney wins, I think I'll probably have something up the next day if I can, just as sort of a, let's show people, we show people how to win, how to lose gracefully. Let's show them how to win gracefully. We want a country back, don't we? We want a unified country. When I say unified, I don't mean unified of opinion, but wouldn't it be nice to just kind of put an end to this rancor, at least scale it back a little bit? I think Romney will prove to be the kind of president that the left is going to find a hard time hating. He's not going to have the same kind of knee-jerk reaction to Romney that they have to Bush, or that we have to Obama. I'd like things to calm down and cool down. I think if we win this thing, that's going to be my position. Let's be graceful. Let's just be graceful. Let's not rub it in. Let's not do any crowing. Certainly not to the people who voted for Obama. Might have to do a little crowing when it comes to Chris Matthews and Keith Olbermann and Ed Schultz and Rachel Maddow and the rest of that team, but I'd name them by name, and I would try to be as I do that later. The morning of, we need to be magnanimous. We need to be magnanimous because victory is everything, and anybody who wants to bitch and moan, you can point to the scoreboard, and that's how winners look, and that's how you flip people, and that's how you continue to win elections in the future. So we show some class and some grace, and lead by example. And when we lost in 2008, I didn't hear anybody on our side doing what I believe the left is going to do for 20 years, namely blame this, blame that, blame the sheeple, blame the this, blame the this, blame the that. We're going to 2008, we got shellacked. We just said our message is terrible, our candidate was terrible, we got to do better. And that's what I've been doing for 4 years, and that's what we've been doing for 4 years. We need to win with some class, and we need to show people how you learn lessons. The left won't do it because the left will sacrifice Obama, and they'll sacrifice his reputation, they'll sacrifice anything so long as they don't have to face the fact that people voted against their policies. That they can never face. That's not just a denial of their politics, denial of their religion. It's a denial of their identity. You won't live long enough, or I won't either, to see the left come to the place where they said, you know what, it's just guess the American people don't like liberalism. That is never going to happen. You're never going to see that. So we win with class. So what am I going to be doing after the election video-wise? First thing I'm going to do is, it'll be nice to change tone, but if you think I'm going to change principles, I'm not. I'm going to look forward to hearing about things improving, and when I think Romney's doing things well that Obama didn't do, it will be my distinct pleasure to point those out. If Romney starts doing things that are contrary to our conservative principles, I'll point those out too. And I get the feeling, I don't think this is going to happen, but if it does, if Mitt Romney really runs as a giant big state liberal, which a lot of people fear, I just can't see that happening. I just can't, but who knows? Then I'm going to be probably more angry at Mitt Romney than I ever was at Barack Obama, because Barack Obama was a opposition. He was the other party, the other team. He was raised by feral Marxists, and he is what he is. I knew what he is. I voted against him. If the guy I voted for starts doing that to me, I'm going to have a real problem. It's time to start talking about a third party then. And having stopped Barack Obama, that's the time to talk about a third party, because then at least the damage, the bleeding has stopped, then you can start talking about long-term changes. We can't lose a vote this time. We got to get every single vote this election. Now that's my public persona. In private, I'm going to crow like there's no tomorrow. I'm going to get just completely falling down, smashed on election night, and I'll be shouting at the top of my lungs, and there'll be language that I hope won't be recorded and used against me later. But we all have our private lives and we all have our professional lives. And my professional life, my intention is to maintain as much class and dignity and to make this loss as easy as possible for the other side, because I'm tired of this. I'm tired of living in two countries, and I don't want to anymore. I think most of the people, if you really look at the country, if I really had to break it down, I'd say there's probably 15% of the country is irredeemably lost in this ideology. And I think the rest of them are just victims of this 25 or 30 point media bias and this constant barrage of being told these lies in movies and us being the villains in TV shows and everything. And I think those people can be saved. And not only saved, I think they are saved. I think they're probably normally good, decent people. They've just been given a lot of bad information. So what I will say this, by the way, of all the things that we need to do in President Romney's term, aside from getting the electoral system cleaned out, is we have to destroy the mainstream media. They have to be destroyed. Not legally destroyed. I don't believe in any of that nonsense. No lawsuits, no banning. Well, maybe lawsuits, maybe civil lawsuits. I mean, if you can sue a doctor for malpractice, I don't know why you can't sue a journalist. But none of this witch hunt. That's another thing, by the way. If it turns out that Romney wins, I think the correct tone to strike will be we get a real attorney general and we launch bipartisan investigations into Fast and Furious, certainly into the Libya situation. And I think if I was the president, I would authorize those investigations. And if people thought it was a witch hunt coming, I'd let them think that for a little while, just to let them think it. And then when we had all the results in, especially if we could prove culpability, if there was criminal negligence on the part of Eric Holder or even of the president, because frankly this Benghazi thing is starting to look impeachable to me, then what I would do is I would say, my fellow Americans, this country is not a banana republic. This country does not go on witch hunts to prosecute the previous administrations. No administration can function with the idea that somebody's going to make a mistake and 4 years from now we're going to be thrown in jail for the decisions we made. We're not going to press charges against any of these people. They're out of office. They're gone. They're not going to do any more damage. We did the investigation in order that we would find out what went wrong, because crimes need to be at least understood and they need to be recognized, if for no other reason, so that we don't commit them again. But the reason I would do the investigations and not just cut directly to the we're not going to punish these people is because you have to make clear to the American people the scale of some of this wrongdoing. And if you don't, then when these people try to make a comeback in 4 years or in 8 years or whatever the case may be, they're just going to get away with it. It's the giant lie, right? We need to show how corrupt, ethically corrupt, legally corrupt, and morally corrupt this administration has been. We need to lay it all out on the table. We need to say these are impeachable criminal offenses that were conducted during the last 4 years, and here's the whole list of them, and present them to the American people, and then you simply say, oh, we're not going to prosecute them. Of course not. The American people prosecuted them. The American people decided that they didn't want these people in office, and they're gone. We're not going to put them in jail. We're not going to press charges, but we want to know what the charges were. We want to know what went wrong. We want to talk about it and bring it to the American people so they can see what went wrong. And we want to bring it to the American people because we are not angels either. And if we start doing these kind of things, we would fully expect that our feet would be held to the fire. We believe in transparency, and we believe in decency and honor and courage and integrity and doing the right thing. And so if I, as President Romney, have an administration that commits these kind of errors, I fully expect that they will be uncovered. And if they're going on while I'm in office, then I deserve to be impeached for them. You make speeches like that, my God, the American people just fall out of their chairs, wouldn't know what to do, because somebody'd be honest with them. And Mitt Romney strikes me as the kind of guy to have that character, not only because he's strikes me as an honest guy. Look, strikes me as an honest guy is dangerous, right? Because Barack Obama struck a lot of people as an honest, bright guy. Strikes you as an honest guy, there's a lot of hero worship and leader worship built into the primate mind. Mitt Romney doesn't just strike me as an honest guy. When Mitt Romney can make a joke at the Al Smith dinner and say, in truth, that in order to prepare for the debate, the first thing I do is abstain from alcohol for 65 years. You got a guy who's abstained from alcohol for 65 years because of his moral and religious convictions. Abstain from having a beer. That doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who does a lot of whoring around or a lot of illegal activities. I don't think we'll. It's possible. It's possible that Mitt Romney will prove to have the greatest moral character of anybody holding that office since George Washington. Not saying that's going to happen. I'm saying it's a possibility. That's what will heal this country. Is not lording it over people, not rubbing their faces in it, doing what he did in Massachusetts, sitting down and trying to find a bipartisan solution, not doing this, hey, I won, not doing any of this showing up late for meetings and just lording it around like certain other people, and not promising to heal the country, by the way. You know, the great thing, I think the one thing that every single successful businessman understands, and that politicians not only don't understand, but politicians are wired precisely the opposite way, is that a businessman underpromises and overperforms because a businessman has to get reelected pretty much every 90 days, every billing cycle, right? If you're a businessman, you have to be reelected every time somebody else rings that little bell when the door opens. That's what a businessman has to do. Businessman has to say every single day, I have to convince the people that are coming to me to vote for me every day. So that's what he has to do. And I think a reasonable man like that, a decent man like that, a square guy like that, is going to be really a tonic for this nation after all of this bombast and healing the racial divide and causing the oceans to stop rising. He's a humble, quiet guy. He doesn't, you know, I didn't know about all the things that Mitt Romney had done until after he became the nominee. I didn't know he gave up his inheritance. I didn't know about all the charity things he's done and all of the good works that he's done and all of the helping out his employees, and people, utter strangers, didn't know about any of that. You know why I didn't know anything about that? Because Mitt Romney didn't talk about it. And that, to me, is his greatest quality. That's the one thing I admire, is humility in people is a sign to me of enormous character and confidence. I think the transcendental sports figures have that too. I know of all the sports, I'm not a big sports guy, except for Gator football. And somebody on the Facebook page said, I love what you say, Bill. We agree on just about everything, but your Gators are going to lose to Georgia in a couple days. And I said, well, I'd rather have Romney lose to Obama than have the Gators lose to Georgia. And that's not going to happen either. Neither of those two things are going to happen. But it was that Michael Jordan thing, which got a lot of play because Michael Jordan sells products, and good for him. And it was the one where he basically said, I have failed to win the game-winning shot 65 times, and I missed this many times, and I blew this clutch play this many times, and I have failed and failed and failed and failed and failed, and that's why I succeed. Hard to imagine somebody like Barack Obama, who's got better game than LeBron, by the way, just ask him, saying something like that. That's the depth, though, isn't it, really? That's the kind of depth of character you have as a winner. You don't get to be a winner unless you've lost a lot. It's just not possible. I'll stand by that statement. I've never really thought about it before. I've never had that thought before, but I don't think it's possible to be a winner unless you've lost a lot. So, he could be really, really, really good. And after the Al Smith dinner, if you didn't see it, it's on, I think I put it on my Facebook page, then that's the first time I actually just loved this candidate, just loved him and felt like I'm really proud he's ours. David Wellham wrote, "Go Knowles," but we won't ban him for that. It's not his fault. He just doesn't know any better. So related to this, Bo Monday, that was Richard Shipp, the first one. What videos I'm going to be doing? We're going to be doing political videos. We're going to keep doing them. And we're going to do them instead of a constant attack and a constant fear and loathing of what's going wrong. We're going to start playing offense. We're going to start saying, what can we do right? Let's get to these foundational issues. Let's teach people what's going on. We've got a limited window here, 100 days, 200 days, the first year maybe of actual influence. Let's play some offense. Let's get some yardage back. Let's get on offense and tell people what we believe and move the ball and convince people. Because now the battle's over for a while. Right? Get them. Be graceful. This is how you win converts, by the way. This is how you won. Germany and Japan. First, you have to beat them, and you have to beat them bad. And once you beat them, then you help them up. You don't help them up first, and you don't help them up after they're half beaten, and you don't beat them and help them at the same time. You destroy them, and then you help them up. And if we win big, and we're graceful and magnanimous, and we're not gloating, and we're not rubbing it in, we're just saying, we tried what you guys like. Let's try what we like. See how you like it. And if it doesn't work, we'll try something else. And if that succeeds, because the economy's like a coiled spring right now. There's so much growth that's suppressed by a lack of a budget, a lack of a tax code, lack of regulatory code, a lack of people don't know who this president's going to demagogue next. I think most people with businesses are smart to be sitting on their money. I don't think they like being called fat cats and 1%ers and evil. So the second this guy gets elected, it's going to be a gigantic explosion, which, of course, the left will say was, oh, Barack Obama's policy's finally coming home. What a terrible tragedy. I predict on Tuesday, Mitt Romney will be elected. On Wednesday, the Dow will go up 35,000 points. And then on Thursday, the Democrats will say, look at that. The Dow went up 35,000 points the day after the election. If we'd only had the election on Thursday, Barack Obama would have won because it was his policies finally coming home to roost. They're never going to drop it. They're always going to say for the next 4 years, this giant boom that's coming, oh, these were Barack Obama's policies just coming to fruition. You stupid American people were this close, and you turn tail. I don't care what they believe. What the American people will know is that when Barack Obama was president, there were 42 months of unemployment above 8%. And when Mitt Romney was president, there were 42 months of economic growth above 8%. And that's what's going to could be another Reagan 20 years out of this, folks. I'm starting to feel that way. So we'll do positive videos, but we'll keep doing them. Don't worry, we're not going anywhere. Bo Monday wants to know, Bill, what are your plans in a post-Obama world? Same kind of question. Are you still going to continue your firewalls? Yes. And other PJTV efforts? Yes. And will you be devoting more time to your space initiative? Yes. Just to lump these together, Brandon Luffman says, wants to hear how my sister's doing. My sister's doing well. Let me take an opportunity before I go any further to thank all of you. I put up a post saying my sister has emailed me, and she said she has I know she's had a bad lung problem her whole life, but apparently now it's so bad that she has to start looking at lung transplant. And I got 200 comments of links, of success stories, of lots of prayers. She read them all. She just started crying. She's just so moved by the whole thing. She wanted to respond, but she just doesn't know how. And frankly, if she does, it'll show up on her friends' pages. And she can't do that because if she's a freelancer like I am, and if the people that hire her find out that she's that sick, they just won't hire her. But she asked me to tell all of you, and I'll, as I did on the Facebook page, that not only was the advice and the information superlative, but the prayers and the support is just enough to knock the wind out of you. And I told her, yeah, I knew what my people were like. She's looking into various therapies. It turns out, as a result of this Facebook page, she got sent to a place where there was a very simple test that she had never been given in 40 years. And if it turns out that she tests positive for this, then much of this would have been preventable. And that, she said, if that happens, you're going to be able to hear the scream in L.A. She lives in Fort Lauderdale. And I told her, well, if that happens, we'll deal with the scream later. That means that at least now you can stop it from getting worse. It will not have to get another day worse. And we just need to look on the positive side of that. But thank you again for all of that. So, and Brandon, thanks for asking about that. But Brandon's main question that I copied is, as for other topics, I'd like to hear more about the Free Frontier Project in Aurora. I really want to be a part of the Free Frontier. And Sean McGee said pretty much the same thing. I'm dead serious about working with you on the space venture. How soon after the election will you get started? I'm going to do a whole thing, I think, after the election on the Free Frontier. Again, because I did a large part of one. I've talked to people, including Burt Rutan, and other people who are no-nonsense engineering people. When I say engineering people, I don't mean just nuts and bolts engineers. I mean almost like political engineers, people who are so successful in so many things, people who are just so good at making things happen that I trust their input in a way that I'd never trust mine, because I'm fundamentally a dreamer and idealist. I'm kind of an idea guy, and I'm not a follow-through guy, not a management guy at all. And I've reached enough maturity through experience, and by experience I mean having the living daylights beat out of me for 5 decades, to realize what I'm good at and not good at. So needless to say, the first thing I will do is put a manager and a person who knows how to execute in the front of this thing, and then I can just go off and sit out in the grass and come up with neat ideas, and people can make them happen. Because I'd rather have somebody, as you well know, if you have any experience in life, people who make things happen are far, far, far more successful than people who have great ideas. Because it's great, you go far, 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 far further in life by successfully executing a C- idea than you do by having an A+ idea that never gets done. So I'm going to get some executors on this. Anyway, the point is, I've talked to people who are practical people, and I said, what's wrong with this idea? And they said, there's nothing wrong with this idea. We don't see any reason why this wouldn't work. And by the way, the free frontier thing, sorry, I should have led with this, is this idea that that we're basically going to crowdsource a space program. We're going to do what we did with Declaration Entertainment. We're going to do it much, much larger, and we're going to basically go to the American people for $9.95 a month, and we're going to sell them. This is the thing. See, this is where I think I do have some insight. We're not going to even sell them a space program. We're going to sell them national pride, and we're going to sell them hope. We're going to sell them the idea that they are living not in a country that's best days are not behind them, but in front of them. I think that's worth $9.95 to people. I think I can make that case. So the idea of the free frontier is you become a member, and you're still paying taxes, and your taxes are going to entitlements and all that other stuff, and some of your taxes are going to NASA. You can't stop paying those taxes, so I'm asking you not to cut back on your taxes, because you can't do that. We'll be asking you for another $10 a month automatically off your credit card, and that money will be applied exclusively to putting Americans in space and keeping them there forever. And as our technologies become more advanced, and as our safety record improves, then we will take members with us on a lottery basis. If you're a member, you get a chance to ride in a jet airplane, a high-performance jet. And when we get a suborbital vehicle, you get to ride in a suborbital vehicle, like the Spaceship Two flights. Those cost $200,000. Ours cost $995. If you're a member, you get to go. And we do a lot of them. I'd buy one. We just fly them every day, every week anyway. And then when we get orbital technology and we get a little inflatable habitat up there, once we're convinced it's safe with test pilots and engineers, then we'll start taking members. $9.95 a month, you can spend 4 days in orbit. Think about that. And then we're going to go to the moon. We're going to walk on the moon. I'm going to walk on the moon before I die, or I'm going to die trying. And that'll cost $9.95 for you. Now, it's a lottery, but I've noticed that people play the lottery. And the nice thing about this lottery is you win even if you don't win, because your money goes to a space program. It goes to the future. It goes to vision. And we're not interested in going around in circles. The end goal for this thing, as far as I can see, is only as far as I can see, because we'll eventually have to find some other visionary to hand this off to. But right now, as far as I can see, is as far as I can see technologically. And the end goal of the free frontier, to the limits of my vision in terms of what I expect to live long enough to at least see happen, is I want to see a series of interplanetary vehicles. I want to see vehicles that are constructed in orbit that hopefully, very likely, will be using nuclear rockets, because nuclear rockets are at least twice as efficient, and in many cases with some of these technologies, 7, 8, 10, 20 times more efficient than chemical rockets. I want them to be reusable. I want them to be based in orbit, built in orbit, and all they do is go from one point in the solar system to another point in the solar system quickly. They have to carry enough fuel and enough delta V, enough thrust, to be able to get from here to there fairly quickly. You know, I remember when Voyager went to Jupiter. It took 6-7 years to get to Jupiter, and then they sent this New Frontiers probe to Pluto. And if they'd sent it at that speed, it wouldn't get to Pluto for 50 years. So in order to send it to Pluto, they put a lot of delta V behind this craft, and I think it got to Jupiter in like 10 months or 7 months. Shocking. It's like, and that's supposed to take 7 years? It takes 7 years if you don't have any push. But if you have some push, boom. And I want a series of spaceships. They're not terribly sophisticated. They'd look an awful lot like the International Space Station. They'd give them a little spin en route to give some artificial gravity. And I'd send them everywhere. And that way, if you had these vehicles, if we paid for, and when I say if the American people paid for these vehicles, and if you wanted to do a Mars mission, then what you have to do is you have to build a Mars lander and some domes. But the vehicles are there. The vehicles are there all the time. Mission to Ceres, put up a water cracking station, You use the same vehicle. You want to go to Venus? Same vehicle. Want to go to the asteroids? Same vehicle. Want to go to Jupiter? Same vehicle. Constantly improving. You're constantly upgrading the A model, B model, C model, and after you've done as much as you can with the design, you get a new design, and we are making progress. And this is going to cost people's lives. Because if we're not killing people, we're not trying hard enough. You don't try to kill people, but if you're not killing people, you're not trying hard enough. We have a perfect record in aviation, commercial aviation. It's either 11 years now or 12. It's 11 years without a major jetliner crash in this country, only because we were killing commercial crews every week. You know, in the 40s and 50s, when we learned how to do this, we were losing an airliner a week. Boom. So there's no shortage of brave men and women out there, and there's no shortage of daring out there. What there is right now is a shortage of money out there, and I know the American people because I'm one of them, and I'll pay $10 a month to have my national pride back and to not have to watch a Chinese do what we're supposed to be doing. That's our job. So that's what I'm going to do after this election. If we lose, it's still a possibility. If we lose, we're going to do videos, but they're going to look very different. I suspect if we lose, then we will start something I've called the common sense resistance. But I don't think that's going to happen. I hope it doesn't. Just saw in the comment section, what will we name our first ship? I had a thought about that. I'd like to actually have the first two ships be essentially just linear things, you know, fuel tanks and pressurized modules and engines in the back. But I'd like to put the fuel tanks at the front and then the living section in the back, because I'd like to have these two things be identical. Two identical, you know, basically cylindrical ships with a docking module on the top. And I'd like to launch them both at the same time, and they'd have a vector. They'd go off together. They'd do the same burn together. They'd be within, you know, a couple hundred miles of each other. You wouldn't have them touching distance, needless to say. But you'd launch them together, and as soon as the burn was done, you'd dock them, and you'd put them end to end, and then you'd spin them. And since the living sections would be out towards the end, you'd have a fair amount of gravity. The gravity would be on the same vector as the launch vector, which means that up would be up no matter whether you were under acceleration or in spin. And the idea of having two of them would be that each one would have the capability of, under emergency situation now, with everybody really living on the edge, you would have the capability of making sure that if any one of those ships exploded, had a catastrophic failure, you would be able to get the crew back in the other one. You'd bring your own lifeboat. They'd be twin lifeboats. They'd be lifeboats of each other. And if you had a mission that was so big that you couldn't take everybody in the one if you lost the first, then you'd have to send 4 of them. 4, 2 and 2. That way one ship can't explode and everybody gets back. I like the idea of a lifeboat. I do. I like the idea of safety. So the answer to the question is, if I had those first 2 ships, what would I name them? I'd name the first one the Constitution, and I'd name the second one the Enterprise. And I would launch these 2 things together, and I'd said I'd go to Venus in it, and people said Venus is a poor choice. I'm not talking about landing on Venus. I'm saying for a shakedown cruise, I'd send them around the moon, but for the first mission, I'd go to Venus because the energy to get to Venus is nothing. It's much, much, much closer and much, much easier than Mars. And even if you didn't go into orbit around Venus, even if you wanted to just do a 2-burn flight, you burn out of Earth orbit, you do a flyby of Venus, you come back, you decelerate into Earth's orbit, even if you had to launch the engine twice only, you would still be able to say, we just traveled to another planet for $9.95 a month. It would be the Constitution and the Enterprise, and they'd have separate crews, and I would put the most capable, competent, experienced astronaut commander in charge of the Constitution, and he would be in charge of the mission, and I would be the captain of the Enterprise, and if you don't like it, you can pound sand. Because that's what I was supposed to do. Let's move on. Where are we on time? We're about an hour. I got some more questions about the election, and I just don't think I want to take them. I just think I've talked about that enough tonight. Here's one that I do want to talk about because it is a little different. Gabe Grantham says, what are your thoughts about the threats of violence and assassination if Romney wins? Every time Romney won a debate, there was a lot of tweeting out there about if Romney's elected, I'm going to kill Romney. I guess this kind of thing goes on all the time. A lot of trash talking, you know, a lot of hip-hop crowd trash talking and that whole thing. So most of it's trash talking. I'm not so much worried about assassinating Romney. I'm always worried about assassinating any president. I think, frankly, the threats to Obama will be far greater than the threats to Romney, just judged by the competition. I worry about, if you're going to hit the president, I worry a lot about guys who are out in the woods of Montana practicing with Barretts for 5 years, 20 guys practicing with 50 caliber sniper rifles for 5 years. I'm more worried about those guys as a potential assassination threat to the president than I am about a bunch of street thugs that hold their guns like this and just pop 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 with their 9s and their 10s. I don't think the Secret Service is too worried about those guys. I'm looking forward to them being investigated for making death threats against Romney, because I don't make death threats against Barack Obama, and anybody who does make a death threat against a president or a candidate deserves to get a visit from the Secret Service, and if it turns out they're serious about it, then they probably deserve to go to jail. We're a civilized nation, and we don't tolerate that kind of thing. I'll tell you what I am concerned about, though. I saw this statistic today. I've been worried about this for a while, but I saw the statistic today worried me even more. Apparently, something like 93% of Obama's core supporters, and that's not code word for black people. By the way, if I meant black people, I'd say black people. His core supporters, the dyed-in-the-wool liberals, 97% of them, as of today, think he's going to win this thing. I don't think anybody really, looking at the polls, thinks he's going to win these things, especially looking at the way the historical trends break out. We talked about that in the beginning. What happens if 97% of the people, or 93% of his supporters, think that Obama's going to win, and then Obama loses in a landslide? I think we're going to have a real serious chance of riots in this country, a serious chance. People riot when they win basketball championships or football championships, or they riot when they don't. I think if there are riots, especially if there are black riots, if black neighborhoods riot because Barack Obama loses the election, and there's, that's what's going to happen. The losing the election part, I don't have any idea about the riots. I think that is going to be, I think I've talked about this before. I'm sure I have, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. That'll be the end of liberal guilt. That'll be the end of the 100 years of treating black people as what's the word, that expression, that great expression, the racism of low expectations, low standards, the gentle racism of lower expectations, something like that. That'll be the end of this liberal guilt and this idea of these poor people. And then the American people will finally have an adult conversation about this, and we'll start doing what we should have done in the beginning, which is we'll start treating people as individuals. We won't talk about black people and white people anymore. We'll talk about Dave Anderson. We'll talk about William Johnson. We'll talk about Marcellus Wallace. Is he a good man or a bad man? Is she a good woman or a bad woman? And then we'll know we've come to the end of our racial problems in this country when we stop talking about it at all. By the way, I saw a sign today I was watching the news. It was one of these Obama campaign headquarters. And the signs all over the Obama campaign headquarters said something like Asian Americans for Obama and African Americans for Obama and, gays and lesbians for Obama. It's all tribes, isn't it? It's all just little tribes and special interest groups. Divide the country up into tribes and get everybody all fired up and angry and pissed off and outraged and all this stuff. Just be sure to do that. Romney just has, I think, by the way, one of the signs I didn't see at this Obama headquarters was people with common sense for Obama. Didn't see any of those. I don't think the riots will be serious riots. I think in order to have the kind of, when I say a serious riot, my definition of a serious riot is the LA riots or the riots after Martin Luther King. The Rodney King riots. Isn't that funny? I never made that connection before this exact second. It never, ever, ever occurred to me until this exact second. Rodney King, Martin Luther King. I'm sure everybody's been talking about it. I just never got it before just now. But those two riots were serious, long-term, nationwide riots that lasted for days, if not weeks, because there was a genuine outrage on the part of people, a gut-level kind of punched in the stomach kind of thing. I don't think Obama losing will have that kind of emotional power. I think it'll be bigger than the Kings, than the Lakers or the the Braves losing. They riot in Toronto, for God's sakes, or somewhere in Canada they had a riot when they won or lost. So I don't think it'll be that small, but I don't think it'll be as big as some giant, awful psychic blow like the Rodney King thing, seeing the guy getting beaten up and having those cops acquitted. But, you know, I think that America will pay close attention if, after being told that they've just voted in 2008 for the post-racial president, the man who would heal the racial divide, the man who many people voted for, fully aware of the fact they knew nothing about him, in order to prove the world and to themselves and to black America and to white America that they're not racist, only to continue to be racist and called racist and accused of racism by this man who never kept a promise in his life. I think if this thing ends in riots, that will be an interesting bookmark on the great progressive experiment in race, won't it? That'll be a pretty interesting bookmark where American people as a body go out there and say, all right, we're going to do this. We're going to vote for a guy who has no experience, a complete unknown. We're going to do it because he's black. Let's not joke around. Everybody knows this is the case. There's no question this is what happened. Right? Just say it. They voted for him because he's black. If he'd been a white candidate with those credentials, he wouldn't have gotten into the primaries. So they took a chance. They wanted to feel good. They wanted to make a point about themselves. They were tired of being called racist, tired of having Europeans who don't have a black mayor. There's not a black mayor in Europe that I'm aware of, telling us how awful we are and how disgusting we are, because it is disgusting. Racism is disgusting. And we just had enough. So people voted for Barack Obama to prove they aren't racist. And if it turns out that people riot because he's defeated, then the progressive view of race in this country failed. And we all know it's failed. By the way, this is an interesting argument, and I didn't come up with it. I don't know if Jeremy said it or a couple of other people said it, but it certainly is true. It's one thing to elect a president because he's black, but if the country has reached a point where they will fire a president who's black because he's doing a bad job, then you know you've really made some progress, right? Because there's really two stages of this racism thing. There's the prejudice against the despised party, the hated party, the other. There's the prejudice against them. And then the second stage, which is certainly not as bad, but is also not healing, it's not over, is the overreaction, it's the affirmative action, it's the giving them not just the benefit of the doubt, but giving them a pass for behaviors that no one should have to be able to be excused of. So it's a step. It's a huge step to elect a black president. Proves you don't have a prejudice against black people anymore. If you fire a black president, then you know you've really made some progress, because now you've not only proved that that he's a bad person automatically because of the color of his skin. You've also gotten to the point where you said he's no longer a good person automatically because of the color of his skin. We'll find out. I'm not going to be at DEFCON 1, but I'll be at DEFCON 3 on election night. I hope it doesn't happen. I don't think it will, but it might. Let's see. Chris Files says, looking forward very much to tonight's TSL. I'm a convert. I often start opposed to your positions, but you persuade me with your facts. Thank you, Chris. It's very kind of you. It means the world to me, and it is it's a great privilege to be able to put things in a way that does convince people. And I'm certainly not right about everything. And by the way, just so you know and everybody else knows, I didn't start here, buddy. I got here just like you did. I started a long way from where I am now. I just started paying attention to the facts, and I started looking at what was real, and people made better arguments than the arguments that I had in my own head, and I changed my mind. And I may change my mind again someday. But he writes... He writes, I'm concerned. I know the Stratosphere Lounge is a side gig for you. It doesn't pay your bills. I get that. But if I'm going to take you seriously, I should set aside my block of time and listen and watch it. I benefit from both. How can I make the show a priority? I can give money to PJTV, but that's do your work a day job. Help me help you. Very, very kind of you. Very kind. I started doing the Stratosphere Lounge for two reasons, as it exists in its current format, which means the sort of loose change format where it's not a low priority. I've said this before, but it's my lowest priority. Because I have other things to do. For example, last night I had an event with Condoleezza Rice that I had to attend. I was speaking at, and that trumps this show. If this was a radio show, I would have had to get a fill-in host, and so that's the difference. But I think that once we get to the post-election thing, I believe I'll have more time because I love doing the show. So the first reason I did the show was because I wanted to do something for my Facebook friends, because the Facebook thing is different than the blog. When I was doing a blog, I was putting out content every day, and I don't push a lot of content on Facebook every day. I don't do a lot of content compared to what I used to do or compare what other bloggers do. I mean, Glenn Reynolds puts out 30 posts a day. I put out a video every, 2 weeks. Trifectas and all that other stuff's every week, but you get the idea. So I wanted to do something mostly to provide some sort of service and thanks to the people who've been so kind to me on Facebook. And that was the first thing I wanted to do, and I wanted it to be personal. I didn't get a whole lot of personal questions. I got a couple. I'm saving them for last. But I wanted it to be a Facebook thank you. It's just that simple, and a way to interact with people, and a way to get to know you better, and a way to get to know me better. So it's terrific fun in that regard. But the other reason I did it, and a major part of me making the decision is, I like this name, the Stratosphere Lounge, and I have an idea for doing a talk show, an actual talk show, and not a daily show, not a snark show, but a show that was funny and a show that had real depth to it. And I think I've mentioned this, but it was probably back in episode 1 or 2 or something, so I'll just give it to you again real quick. My version of what the Stratosphere Lounge would look like would be, I just love that name, by the way. I would have an opening montage which would show you Los Angeles. And you'd see how liberal LA is, and you'd see all the big studios and all the, the gleaming office towers. And you'd have different people driving down the street in their cars, all American-looking people, normal people, servicemen and insurance salesmen, and not this kind of glitterati crowd, just regular folks. And they're driving down the streets of LA, and they're kind of looking for something. They're trying to find something. And intercut with this, we'd have Petula Clark singing about "I Know a Place." And intercut with this, we'd have me and co-hosts in the band, and guys like Zoe and brilliant guys like Gary Graham, great musicians. Because my band, our band, every one of them would be pundit. Every one of them would have something to say. They'd all have their own reputations. I want an all-star cast. And so what would happen is you'd intercut the guys getting ready and us in makeup and prepping for the show. And as you do this, you start to show people finding this place and going downstairs. It's like a speakeasy with a little slot on the door. And if you had if you had a service ribbon, or if you were in uniform, or if you had American flag, in you go. Everybody else, hippies and stuff, turned away. And then you'd see intercut with the music playing. It'd be an opening montage. You'd see people going down this staircase under this building while we're getting ready in the green room and stuff. And then the set would be an underground concrete basement. It would be an industrial basement, one of these huge, kind of fairly low, not super low ceilings, but a giant underground basement. And I'm getting to it there, Cursor Tap 1. And I would have all my waitresses be smoking hot, but they'd be in their spare time, in between orders in the back. They'd have like a little whiteboard, and they'd be doing physics equation, and they'd be reading like Proust, and they'd be reading Adam Smith and Payne, and they'd be reading Mark Twain, and they'd be doing physics equations. They're just brilliant and gorgeous. And there'd be little tables. It wouldn't be bleachers like the Daily Show. Little cocktail tables, little rose-colored spotlights, little dark room, a little candle there, and everybody would be kind of dressed. You had to be kind of dressed to come to the Stratosphere Lounge. And then we'd come out, and we'd do the show with the thin ties, not in costume, but to evoke the 60s, because that was America at the height of its powers, and I want to get her back to where she should be, and I like the look. And instead of instead of all these graphic elements and all this whiz-bang CG stuff like at the opening of the Daily Show, it'd be super simple. There'd be like a turquoise wall in the background with kind of like one of those 50s diamond patterns, and it would say the Stratosphere Lounge in that kind of script like on the Stratosphere thing, and there'd be like a little rocket kind of a stylized little vector up there, and it would all be practical stuff. And then I think what I'd actually do is I'd get these prop TV cameras, the ones from back in the day, the things that were the size of a, refrigerator. And I'd have them on the giant tripods, and I'd put little HD cameras on the inside, but I'd have them look like the big, nasty old TV cameras. And we'd just do the talk show, and we'd do some monologue, and then, we'd have some guests on there, and we'd talk politics, and it would be intelligent but funny, and it wouldn't be snarky. It would be dry, but it wouldn't be snarky. I've had enough snark. Snark is cynicism. I think there's been enough cynicism for a while. And I just do it underground. And the entire premise, you see, about having it underground would be that underneath the feet of liberal Hollywood, and I mean literally under the sidewalk of liberal Hollywood, sits this conservative place where everybody's kind of dressed, everybody's very smart, everybody's very polite and respectful. You'd have people on, and you wouldn't make fun of them. You wouldn't do ambush things. You try to flip them. I happen to believe, by the way, I'm utterly convinced if I had a weekend with Jon Stewart, I could turn that guy into a conservative. I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever. I think I'd do that for most people. But yeah, be cool. Sharkskin suits and be kind of bitching. So that's why I decided to do the show. To answer your question, though, specifically, Chris, thank you very much for your offer to help pay for it. Even if I had people paying for it, it wouldn't move it to the top of the stack right now. There might be a world where that's all I do. There might be a world where I just do a radio show, either on broadcast radio. I've had some offers. I haven't really wanted to do it. I sat in for Rusty Humphries 5 times. That's a 3-hour show. The main reason I don't want to do it as it exists is because the AM format is so heart-rendingly awful. You talk for 4 minutes, then there's 4 minutes of commercials. You talk for 7-8 minutes, then there's like 6 minutes of commercials. I mean, it's unbearable. It's unbearable. But with the internet, you might have an opportunity. You might have an opportunity to do some clever things where maybe you produce a show for TV and then you put it on something like, I've had this thought for quite a while. You could put it on, like, let's say the TV Guide channel at 4:30 in the morning, from 4:30 to 5:30 a.m., and you just set your TiVo or your DVR to go get the show. Nobody watches this stuff in real time anymore. If you're TiVoing a show or DVRing a show, doesn't matter if you're DVRing NBC in prime time or whether you're DVRing TV Guide channel 4:30 in the morning. The DVR doesn't care. You don't care because you watch it when you come home. So anyway, I deeply appreciate the offer. It's very kind, and I know maybe a lot of people feel this way. There conceivably could be a world, and maybe quite a world, where this becomes my primary means of dealing with people. And if that's the case, then we'll have a serious conversation. If it becomes that case where I have to do this, have to is not the word I wanted to use there, where I get to do this once a week, once a day, if we can monetize it, maybe that'd be the thing to do. I sure do love it. But right now, it's the bottom of my stack, and if I can't move it around, I can't do it. And I have occasionally Tuesday nights events. Last several weeks, for whatever reason, just through the randomness, I have Wednesday nights events, and those are paying events, and I have to take them. So that's why it's moving around. I appreciate the effort, and I appreciate the concern. I certainly appreciate the desire. But right now, we're going to have to just kind of do catch as catch can. The final thing I'll say about this is, right now, according to this thing, if I read it correctly, we're looking at 248 viewers that are watching this right now. There will be 20 to 30 times that many people watching it on YouTube later. So the huge majority of people that get to see the Stratosphere Lounge get to see it recorded. The interplay is nice. And by the way, if we get to do the show seriously, we ever take the show seriously, we'll start taking call-in questions, and we'll start taking dial-in questions with Skype and stuff. That'd be really fun. I'd really love to do that. It's not hard to do either. So anyway, that's the potential future of what we're going to do after the election, especially with the Stratosphere Lounge. But the Stratosphere Lounge is not going away. That I can promise you. I really enjoy doing this. Asaph Epstein asked me a question that just grabbed me. I think this one actually came from the election hot seat stream. I just saw it and I wanted to answer it. Bill, do you have anything positive to say about Barack Obama? I mean, truly positive, not an insult disguised as a compliment. I only ask because as time goes by, you seem to think less and less of him, and I wonder if you see any redeeming qualities in the man. I'm happy to say that when we resurrected Eject, at least as an archive, which you can find by the way at eject.com. You want to read all the original essays that got me started? There they are. And it's also at billwhittle.net. There's a tag on billwhittle.net that'll get you to eject, eject, eject. But the last post, excuse me, the last post I put up before we moved it over to PJ Media, and when it went to the PJ Media site, I really lost interest in it. It didn't feel like my blog anymore. I contractually had to do it, but it just didn't feel like mine anymore. But the last post that put up before I moved it, when I restored the site, it was the top of the stack, and it's still the top of the stack, was the day after the election 4 years ago. And I wrote, I'd like to congratulate President Obama on his historic win. Congratulations to our liberal opponents. It's only politics. You won fair and square. And while it wasn't my guy, the only explanation I have is that we didn't make as strong a case as you did. And we're going to try to correct that in the next 4 years, and we'll see you in 2012. But congratulations, President Obama. You mean a lot to a lot of people, and I hope you turn out to be the guy you say you are. And then you didn't. And every year, it got more and more egregious and appalling. And I remember, the first thing that most people remember was the breaking into the Harvard professor thing when he called the police stupid and, and basically said it was a racist thing because this guy was black. And it's just like, oh, I thought we were past that. And then it's just one damn thing after another, and all the things with, Obamacare and all of these things were political. To be honest with you, Asaph, who's probably not even watching, as I say, it was in a different stream. But these were political things, and political things made me angry. But then we started to get into, character issues. And I don't remember the first one. I was not impressed with Fast and Furious, needless to say. But I think the first time I remember really, really, really making this personal was when he leaned forward and said on camera to the Russian president that he'd give up the missile defense shield and sell out Poland in exchange for personal political gain. That's when I said to myself, no, we've gone well past a political disagreement now. This is treason. This is an evil man. This is a man who's been given a sacred trust, and I know about his background. I know how he got to be the way he is. But this is the definition of treason. And then it got worse. It got worse with Benghazi and going to bed. You got a firefight going on with your embassy, people being killed. You're the most powerful man in the world with the most powerful military in the history of the planet, and guys are still down there fighting for their lives, and you just decide to go to sleep? Who can do that? Could you do that if it was a drugstore that you had that was breaking in? You get a phone call from the cops, say, hey, there's some people, there's a little flash riot, and they're breaking into your drugstore. Would you just go, okay, well, let me know, guys, in the morning. Just roll over and go to sleep and hope that the attendant would take care of it? If you owned a 7-Eleven, wouldn't you be down there immediately? I would. So that was it. But then when he finally, Barack Obama arrested a filmmaker for making a movie that embarrassed Barack Obama. It's not even worse. It's worse than that, because that film actually didn't embarrass him. That film was the cover story to cover his own failure. His own failure of his policy, and his own failure of security, and his own failure of the wonderfulness of him, and how he's defeated Al-Qaeda and all that other stuff. By the way, he got bin Laden. I don't know if he mentioned that. So there is a guy in prison now for making a movie, and he was placed in prison by the administration. There was a parole issue. So finally, like with every single other parole violation in this country, at 2 o'clock in the morning, 30 or so state troopers went and pulled this guy out of his room in the middle of the night and took him in and arrested him. Of course he's a political prisoner. Of course he is. And the reason he's in jail is because Barack Obama said to the Middle East, whether he believed or not that this was a riot was caused by the movie, it doesn't matter. What happened was Barack Obama had that man arrested and put in jail for speaking his mind and exercising his First Amendment rights in order to appease 7th century savages on the far side of the world, because the more rioting and burning they did, the worse he was going to look. And to me, that's worse than selling out the Poles with the missile defense. Because in that first case of treason, he was he was a traitor to the country. And I use this word with calm confidence, by the way, because if you look up the definition of treason, you will not find any operational difference between what he did and what the word means. Of course it's treason. His treason in terms of selling out the missile defense shield was to sell out our security. And that's treason. But when he put that guy in jail in order to appease Muslims, he put the First Amendment away. He shredded the First Amendment. He spat on the foundational ideas. And somehow it hurt worse to see the ideal sold out than to see the security, which may mean our lives, sold out. I'd rather think that my life and my friends and my family's lives were imperiled by the man than to think that the ideals that make this country what it is were imperiled by the man. It's worse to me. And he doesn't care. And that guy's in prison right now. You know, we're so proud of ourselves in this country. We're at a right to be proud. We've fought our lives for this. We've fought generations and generations and generations of men, mostly men, but now women too, have died overseas to protect freedom in this country, the first of which is the freedom to speak your mind without consequences. And there is a political prisoner in America at this second who wasn't a cop killer, didn't do any of these other things that they claim are political prisoners. Oh, the guy blew a policeman away. He's a political prisoner. No, this guy made a movie, and he's in jail because the president finds it useful to have him in jail. So can I think of anything good to say for the guy? They say he's a great family man. I don't believe he's a great husband. I don't for a second believe that Michelle and Barack Obama have a loving, loving relationship. I think she is one of the most mean-spirited creatures I've ever seen. It was not news to me when this whole business about their divorce papers were unsealed. That came out, I think it was in the, was it The Amateur? That book that came out a couple months ago? Where after Barack Obama ran for office and lost, it's the only election he'd lost prior to this one, Michelle said, don't do it, you're not going to win. He did it anyway, he lost. And Michelle Obama divorced him. Well, had divorce papers written up. I'm not sure exactly how far it went. I don't think they actually filed them, but she had them drafted. And Obama, according to his friends, was suicidal. So these are not loving people. He seems to be a good dad to his children. There's your answer, Asaph. That's about all I can say. He seems to be genuinely good dad to his children. That's not enough to balance the things he's done. And forget about his policy. We're not talking about politics. I'm not when I say explain the things he's done, I'm not talking about Obamacare, for example. He's a liberal. He's supposed to believe in Obamacare. He's supposed to. This is what he believes. I can't. That's not criminal. That's not even unethical. Because by his standards of ethics and by what he basically said he was going to come and do, that's what he was expected to do. I can't fault the guy for getting us Obamacare. I can fault him and Pelosi and Reid for using cheap legislative tricks and con games to get it through. That I can fault them for morally. But when you take an oath to defend the security and the ideals of this country and you sell them both out on television, there's no person in there that I have left to admire. There are people who I disagree with politically, but who I admire. There are times, believe it or not, few times, very few times, when I admired Chris Matthews. I thought Chris Matthews defended Andrew Breitbart rather well with the Shirley Sherrod thing. But I don't admire him. I tend to have moments where I admire Jon Stewart only because I've seen Jon Stewart get as disgusted with his side as he does with our side when he sees something. I don't think he sees a lot, but there's a certain something to admire there. And I've said this before, and I know this is extremely controversial, but there is much about the jihadis that I admire more than I admire Barack Obama, because while I think these people are savages and murderers and criminals and primitive, brutal, awful people, they don't sell themselves out. They're not traitors to their own cause. They don't take an oath to defend Allah and then sell themselves out to us. On some level, I do admire those people more than I admire the President of the United States who will sell our missile defense shield to the Russians in exchange for political gain and sell our First Amendment right to these jihadis for political gain. Yeah, I do admire them more. pretty sad. I think these days are coming to an end. Let's see. We're going to run a little long. Why not? Nothing else to do. Dave Wellman says, I'd like Mr. Whittle's take on the bayonets and horses remark, especially in light of the canceled F-22 procurement, the F-35 seemingly going nowhere. Navy still has problems with LCS. I think that stands for Littoral Combat Ship, and so on and so on and so on. He talks about really the idea of existing airframes being updated with avionics and that sort of thing. So that's really what I want to talk about. I will say, for those of you who may not have heard me say earlier, that it's hysterical to me that when Barack Obama was doing the most petty thing I've seen him do, not the most evil thing by any means, but the most petty thing I've seen him do, in that third debate when he said, well, you may not know this, Governor, but there are ships out there called aircraft carriers, and airplanes land on them, and they have ships that travel into the ocean called nuclear submarines. And I knew it, and everybody else in the Navy immediately on Twitter and on all the blogs said, Mr. President, the most succinct I ever saw was some Navy guy said, Mr. President, a ship that travels under the ocean is called sunk. Boats travel under the water. A submarine's a boat. And everybody who knows anything about the Navy knows a submarine's a boat. Surface the boat. So even when Obama's being snarky and condescending, like he's so smart and he's commander-in-chief and knows all, he still doesn't know what he's talking about. Likewise with the bayonets, they still issue bayonets, needless to say, and you certainly hope you don't ever find yourself in the kind of combat where you need to use your bayonet, but they still stock them, and they still what is the word I'm looking for when you give out a weapon? It's just flown out of my head. I can see it right in front of me. Somebody will tell me. Anyway, so there's that whole thing about the whole thing. But the issue that does interest me specifically, because I have a little background in the military as an amateur, is the idea of the canceled F-22, the F-35, upgrading things like this. The B-52 issued, that's the word. The B-52 is not only older than the pilots that fly it, it's older than the parents of the pilots that fly it. We have guys who are second generation. I think we're probably approaching third generation B-52 pilots. The plane came online in, I think it was 1952. And most of the earlier airframes, the A models and stuff with the tall tails, were either scrapped or were converted to later models, and G models were popular for a while. You can tell they're newer ones because the old B-52s have a tail that tapers almost to a point, and the newer ones are tails cut considerably lower. But as they continue to upgrade the avionics, you find out that the B-52 is basically just a collection of rivets and aluminum skin, and just like the body, just like the human body with an airplane. If you continue to replace the rivets and the skin, you still have the same B-52, and it's still got the same tail number, but you could theoretically reach a point where there's not a single part of that airplane that was original issue. There's a lot to be said for that. I mean, the B-52 is one of those airplanes that is... Actually, you know what? I'm going to split hairs here since we're in aviation. The B-52 is not one of those airplanes. The C-130 is. The C-130 is one of those airplanes that was designed so perfectly when it was designed that it is virtually impossible to improve on the design, so we continue to fly the C-130 after 50 years or 60 years or however many years we've had it. The Hercules is an astonishingly good design. And it was the second it got out of the factory. And so we keep putting better engines and better avionics in the C-130. It's hard to imagine improving on the C-130. C-17 is obviously much bigger, but for very, very small runways and that kind of mission, the C-130 is still flying because nothing better than the C-130. B-52, on the other hand, keeps flying because we can upgrade it, but the B-52 is just a giant aluminum hole with a cutout in the bottom. The B-52 has 8 jet engines, and they're old jet engines. They're the low bypass pure turbojet engines as opposed to turbofans that you get on the larger airplanes today. And frankly, if I was running the military, this is going to the heart of the question, I think, the thing that Romney and Obama got into the debate on. This would be my take on it. If I was president, this is what I would do as far as an overview of military procurements. As far as the Air Force is concerned, I would retire the B-52, but I wouldn't build a new bomber because it's pointless. We do not ever anticipate having bombers be our first wave in. And if they are going to be, if we need to get a lot of bombs over the target in the first hours, then that's what we have the B-2 for. We spent tons of money on these B-2s. They're $1 billion each or something. It's a spectacular, expensive airplane. We didn't get as many as we wanted, but we got enough. And they live here in the United States. We launched them I think it's Missouri where they're based. And the B-2s take off from continental U.S. and they do the refueling flights and they fly. They're not particularly fast airplane, and they fly to wherever the problem is, and they drop their bombs, and they're stealth. They don't carry an awful high bomb load, but they're virtually invisible to radar. And so we have that weapon. So I don't think we need any more B-2s. The B-52 does what the B-2 and certainly the strike fighters that the Navy has can't do, and not even the B-1, which I think is also probably obsolete at this point, can do. I'm not sure I know what we need a supersonic bomber for anymore. It looks cool. But if it were me, I would maintain the B-2 force because the Air Force can drop more ordnance than the Navy can. The Navy gets there fast, but the Air Force brings in the big punch. Navy and the Marines get there fast, and they're very, very, very lethal. But only long enough, and sometimes they're talking 6 weeks, for the Air Force and the Army to come in with a much, much, much bigger punch. It just takes longer to land that punch. But we're saying the buff is indispensable. The B-52 stands for the big, ugly, is it fat fellow? But I don't think the buff is indispensable. The buff's mission is indispensable. The B-52 is an 8-engined airplane that carries a significant bomb load. And the reason people say the B-52 is indispensable is because the B-52 carries an awful lot of bombs compared to just about anything else that flies. But I can tell you what carries an awful lot more bombs than the B-52 does, and that's the 767. If you've seen a B-52 up close and you're used to just seeing commercial jets at the airports, it's astonishing how small a B-52 looks. It really does. It's a remarkably kind of a tiny, thin-looking little airplane. And the B-52 its mission is essential because you need to be able to take a heavy bomb load over the target and drop those bombs. But I don't know that the B-52 is the plane to do that. If it were me, I would take a serious look at converting either 767s or maybe a 747 because you get an extra 2 engines. And the amount of bombs you could carry there, you probably do the whole country in one pass. I would be thinking smart about this. I don't think you certainly don't need a new conventional bomber if you have these kind of reliable airframes that are already on station, they're already produced. We have a tremendous maintenance history. We have a parts interchangeable history. I think it's just smart. I would just convert either 767s, and the only reason I think about a 747 wouldn't be worth it, but you might be able to make the case that you'd rather have 4 engines rather than 2 in a potential combat situation. I don't think so. I think 767 is the way to go. With JDAMs, you could probably carry, God knows how many pounds could you carry on I could probably do the math, but you could carry a lot. And the nice thing about the JDAMs, which is the GPS-guided bomb, is you just basically fly that 767 over the country at 45,000 feet. And the glide cone is wide enough so that you just fly the airplane over the country, and then the bombs just come off and they fly themselves to the targets. Lovely. That's the kind of thinking I'd like to think about. This is now we're getting into Geekville for those of you out there who don't really follow this thing. Too bad for you because I love this kind of talk. I would like to have had more F-22s than we had. I don't know if it makes any sense to restart the line. I don't know enough about that, frankly. I'd be surprised if you could restart it. I suspect once that production line shuts down, the cost of restarting it is so prohibitive. The F-22, we should have had more of them. The F-22 still has some problems. They don't seem to be insurmountable problems, but there's still some problems with it. I like the idea of the United States having a very stealthy, very lethal, cutting-edge stealth fighter. My limited operational understanding of the F-22, when they send them out for red flag missions, is they used to send up a couple of F-15s and they'd put them up against 4 F-16s or 4 F-15s to be the bad guys, and now they have to send up 16 F-16s against 2 F-22s because the F-22 just destroys the airplanes. The other airplanes just don't know what happens. The next thing the computer says you're gone. The F-22 is exactly the kind of fighter that we need to continue to maintain. We need to have the best air superiority fighter in the world, and we must maintain the lead in air superiority fighters. Anytime we get close, we need to do another one. We have to maintain the top air superiority fighter in the country. Now, the F-22 is a superb fighter, and it is useful in the stealth capability, but here's where you have to start thinking about practicality now, because now I want to make the case for 2 other airframes. maybe 3. The best fighter in the history of the world is the F-15. The F-15 was designed as a result of the input of the most important American you never heard of. I did a great essay. I was very proud of this essay on oh my God, what's his name? Colonel Boyd, John Boyd. Sorry about that. 42nd Boyd, who spent his life analyzing what made a fighter good and what made a fighter not good. And the F-15 is a superb fighter because Boyd insisted, and had to ram it through the Pentagon, and the whole story of how he did it's amazing. But the F-15 is such a superb fighter because the F-15 has so much wing. It's got a tremendously large wing area. And wing area determines your turning radius, and wing area determines a lot of things. It certainly determines your bomb load when you're dealing with the F-15 Strike Eagle, which carries just a hell of a lot of ordnance, certainly much more ordnance, I'm sure, than a B-17 carried in World War II, this fighter jet. It's about the size of a B-17, too. It's amazing how small a B-17 is. But the F-15 is the premier world air superiority fighter, and the F-15 Eagle, designed by Boyd because Boyd was a product of the Korean War. We had a 12 to 14 to 1 kill ratio with the F-86 Sabre. The F-86 had a big wing too. That's why it was so good in the turn. Had tremendous reserve amount of lift. So Boyd saw the F-86 Sabre in Korea, saw how effective it was, how light and simple and effective and remarkable it was as a dogfighter. And then he saw Vietnam, where the planes got heavier and heavier and heavier, and they got faster, which they thought was a big deal, and they got, but no, Boyd said it's all about turn. It's all about maneuverability. It's all about your energy maneuverability state. How fast can you accelerate, decelerate, and what kind of a turn can you pull? So Boyd basically designed the F-15 with a lot of wing, and the F-15 to backtrack, back in Vietnam with the F-4 and the F-105, which were called the F-105 was called the Lead Sled, and the F-4 was called the Smoking Thunderhog. To give you some idea of how agile these airplanes were. The F-15 came along because of Boyd, and we went from a 2 to 1, maybe a 1 to 1 kill ratio in Vietnam against the MiG-21 and the MiG-19. And the F-15 came along in the early 70s, mid-70s, and that airplane now has a kill ratio of not 2 to 1 or 10 to 1 or 12 to 1 or 20 to 1. The F-15 has a kill ratio of 172 to 0. It's going to be tough to argue about getting rid of an airplane that has a kill ratio of 172 to 0. So if I was the president, I would have added to the F-22s. I would have maintained the F-15 because, as Lenin said, quantity has a quality all its own. I'd have a lot of F-15s out there. I'd have F-22s for dicey missions where you needed the stealth. I'd have the F-15 to put the cap over the entire hemisphere, and I'd feel very confident with F-15, especially with the new avionics and the AMRAAM missile. It's a tremendous platform. The F-16 is a superb airplane, and the F-16 is superb because it's inexpensive and it is very, very capable. It's a damn good dogfighter, and frankly, the F-16 ought to stay in inventory because it's the prettiest airplane ever built, and they ought to fly it for the next 1,000 years only because we should be able to look at it. But the other airframe I would say that needs to be saved, and this is the fundamental problem with, I think, the way the Pentagon thinks about today, and that is this. That's the F-35. Now, the F-35 is a stealth strike fighter, and it is very, very, very expensive. It's gold-plated, has some tremendous features, and the F-35 probably ideally should have been thought of the way the F-16 was to the F-15. It's smaller than the F-22. It's single engine. So the F-22 is twin engine, the F-15 is twin engine, the F-16 is single engine, the F-35 is single engine. It's supposed to be next generation of both airplanes. The problem is the F-35 is extremely expensive, and as usual, the gold plating mentality of the Pentagon got a hold of the F-35 and decided we want one airplane that we can sell to all of our NATO allies that'll function for the Air Force. It has to do a version of it has to do vertical takeoff and landing for the Marines, and also another version of it has to be able to land on an aircraft carrier. When I say land, it means it has to be able to crash on an aircraft carrier. It has to crash repeatedly on an aircraft carrier time and time again, same airframe. That's madness. We tried this before. We tried it with the F-111. The F-4 was not terribly successful in that regard, although the F-4 was a tremendous airplane, but it was not a superb airplane in any way, shape, or form. So we had to find this airplane that did everything, and we bought the biggest defense, probably the largest commercial contract in history. I don't remember what the number was, but it was billions and hundreds of billions of dollars for this one airplane to do everything. The problem is that they're finding that, look, if you have a vertical takeoff and landing F-35, there's not a lot of ordnance that you can carry if you're going to go straight up. So that's a problem. They find out now that I've heard that the F-35 that's designed for Navy use is simply incapable of mounting a tailhook, because there's no place to put it, and if you put it on there, it rips the airplane apart. So there may not be ever flying F-35s off of carriers, which doesn't sound like a big problem to me, because the F-18 is a superb airplane, just like the F-15, superb. So the F-35, I think, is going to turn into be the giant mistake. But the one airplane of all that you really need to understand where we go wrong as a country is when they start talking about replacing the F-35, which is a very expensive gold-plated airplane, and use it in the ground support role to replace the A-10 Warthog. Now, the A-10 Warthog is like the F-15, designed about the same time, a product of Boyd and also Pierre Sperry? I don't remember. Part of the fighter mafia. The A-10, like the F-15, was designed for a specific purpose. As a matter of fact, it's the way to go, because unlike this new theory of having one airplane do everything, the smart way to go is you say, I'm going to have an air superiority fighter, and that's all it's going to do. It's going to be called the F-15, and it's going to kill other airplanes, 172 to nothing. And then I'm going to have a completely different airplane, and it's going to look completely different. It's going to act completely different, and it's going to kill tanks. It's going to get down in the mud, and it's going to kill tanks. And it's going to kill ground targets. And we'll call that the A-10. We want the F-15 to be very, very fast, very high altitude airplane. We want the A-10 to be a very slow airplane, because when you're looking for ground targets, if you're trying to find a tank and you're doing Mach 2, it's a blur like every other tree down there. So you want to be able to loiter over the battlefield. You want to be able to fly fairly slowly, 300 knots, 400 knots, that kind of thing. And you want to be able to, when you're on a strafing mission, you don't want to be going particularly fast. You get, look, strafing a target with a gun, killing a tank with a gun means you got to point the airplane towards the ground. And if you think about it, if you've ever done it, you realize that you don't get to fly towards the ground forever. So the slower you're actually traveling on your attack in the A-10, the more time you have on target. And for any other number of reasons, the A-10 was designed with twin engines, big engines in the back, up high, mounted up high and kind of above the wing, forward where they usually are, so that it'd be less susceptible to ground fire. And a better infrared signature. The A-10 has a very straight wing, which is not a very fast airplane. The Air Force hated it because it was so slow. The pilots didn't know. It had a good wing for low speed, because you want to be low speed when you're making a turning, banking turn. You're popping off flares. You want to come back and hit that tank. So the brass didn't like it because it was ugly and it was slow, but it was perfect. It was the perfect airplane, and they were about to take it out of service, and all of a sudden Gulf 1 comes along and the A-10s are just chewing up tanks like there's no tomorrow. The A-10 was designed, by the way, around a gun that's the size of a school bus. The gun is the size of a school bus, and they built the airplane around the gun, which is why if you stand in front of the A-10 and look at it straight on, you see that the nose gear is not on the center line of the airplane. It's offset to a side and retracts off the center line because the gun is the center line. So specialized weapons, that's what Robert White just saw. That's what you need. You don't want $1 billion airplane to do all this. And are you really going to put 500 million, I don't know what the F-35 costs, hundreds of millions of dollars. You really want to put those jets down low where everybody's got surface-to-air missiles and everybody's got AAA anti-aircraft artillery and you got all this stuff coming up? No. You want a cheap airplane. I think the A-10's like $7 million, $10 million, something like that. And the A-10, by the way, is so beautifully made, triple redundant control systems, that they said, we're not going to armor the whole airplane. That's too heavy. So what we'll do is we'll build a little titanium bathtub around where the pilot sits, and we'll keep the pilot alive. And A-10s have come home with more holes in them than anything that ever flew, with the possible exception of the B-17. They have had gigantic holes in them. And remember I said a few moments ago that the F-15 had a big wing that gave it so much reserve lift in a turn? The F-15's wing is so big that during a refueling mission, an Israeli pilot flying an F-15 had an air-to-air collision. I think it was with the fueling probe. And he looked over his right wing and he saw nothing but mist coming off of the wing. He decided to try and land the airplane, had to land at high speed because at lower speed he just couldn't, even full opposite aileron wouldn't stop the plane from rolling. So he lands this thing at 80 knots above what its normal landing speed is, and blows the tires and taxis, and the brakes are flaming, and he stops 6 inches on the near end of the runway. And then he hasn't been able to see anything because of all the fuel gushing out of the wing root. He went to look at the damage on his right wing, and the damage on the right wing was there was no right wing. The entire wing of the airplane was gone. That's what happens when you design things well. And so this is the kind of thing I would say with the Air Force. Let's be smart. If we have to replace the B-52, we need to carry a lot of bombs. Let's get a 757, 767 to do that mission. Let's get 767s to do the tanking mission. We've got F-22s. Let's take care of them. Let's not use them if we need them. Let's upgrade the avionics and the weapon systems on the F-15 as long as possible. But when the enemy forces start showing enough stealth fighters so that we become the prey instead of the predators, it's time to build new F-22s or whatever the next step is. We're not even going to get into the subject of unmanned combat air vehicles. These are combat drones because, frankly, as a pilot, as a guy who wanted to be a fighter pilot for most of his life, it's depressing to me to come to the, finally, after 10 years or 20 years of denial, to come to the realization that the drone is the answer, and for no other reason than the F-15, F-16 family are capable of 9G turns. And with the F-16 pilot sitting reclined, you might be able to get a few seconds in a 9G turn, 10, 20 seconds before you lose consciousness. You weigh 9 times what you do. You weigh thousands of pounds, a couple thousand pounds. The 9G turn, you're turning so tight that the G-forces are loaded on you. The 9G turn is not limited to the airframe. The airframe can do more than that. The airframe probably do a 15G turn. The pilot can't do a 9G turn. And if you take the pilot out of the airplane, you get maneuverability that would kill a pilot. It would just kill him. Not only would kill him with a G-load, but with the abruptness of the move, you literally snap his neck. And since you don't have to carry a pilot, you don't have to carry the weight of the pilot, you don't have to carry the life support for the pilot, the ejection seat, the oxygen, none of that stuff. Plus, you can send them places where drones can get killed. You don't have to worry about going in and losing more guys in a rescue mission for a drone. So all of this stuff is important. All this stuff matters. You need to have a balanced look at it. And I just want to close by talking about the Navy, since I'm not a one-trick pony here. Somebody said, I thought it's true, when Romney was talking about the Navy being downsized more than they wanted, and Obama basically said, the military, we're giving them all the money they asked for. They're not asking for this money. And it was only after the debate I was sitting there talking with somebody about this, and I guess it was Jeremy, and it was like, oh, really? Is that what happened, Mr. President? The military said, Mr. President, this $700 billion budget is just too much money. We just wouldn't know what to spend it on. We just blow it on booze. Please, Mr. President, we'd like to pay less. Please, we want a smaller budget. That's what Obama wanted you to think during that third debate. He said repeatedly, I'm just giving him the cuts that the military's asking for. The military's asking for these cuts. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. What I think happened, what I bet my life happened, was that Barack Obama went to them and said, in order to pay for my social programs, generals, I'm going to cut $500 billion over the next 2 years of your budgets. You come back and tell me where you want those $500 billion worth of cuts to be. And these guys go, oh, God, we can't cut $5 billion, but they do. They put their heads together and say, well, if we have to cut $500 billion, we'll take this, 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 and this. They come back to the president and they say, Mr. President, these are the cuts that we recommend. And then Barack Obama stands there on the TV screen and says, I've gotten a budget from the Pentagon that says they want $500 billion less. So the generals tell me they want these weapon systems cut. Who am I to argue with them? The miserable, dissembling liar. No way on earth. No way on earth did the joint chiefs of staff say, Mr. President, that's just too much money for us, sir. We just couldn't spend it. Please take some back. Nonsense. So Romney says we need a 300-plus ship Navy. He says the Navy says they need 300, what is the number, 318 ships, so we're down to 285, heading down to the low 200s. When Reagan was president and Webb was Secretary of the Navy, they were talking about a 600-ship Navy, and I think we had it for a while. It is true that as weapons become more capable, as the engagement range gets larger, you need fewer ships. And as automation systems come online and the sophistication of the weapon systems means you can do more with fewer numbers of platforms, that's true. But what is also true, as somebody pointed out, and I always feel bad not being able to credit people because, you know, I just out in the tornado of information every day for 5 hours and I can't remember where I see these things. But as somebody said, what's also true is that the oceans haven't gotten any smaller. And no matter how capable a vessel is, you still need a certain number of vessels to cover the surface area of the Earth. And when you look at the amount of surface area there is in the oceans of the Earth, it's a lot of surface area. So if you have fewer ships, you means you've got to, they have to cover more territory. Ships don't move very quickly. So the problem is, I think Romney's right. I think we need more Navy. What kind of Navy? Well, we have a new generation of aircraft carriers coming up. It's not the NX. I think the George H.W. Bush, the next carrier, is a hybrid, sort of a halfway house between the Nimitz-class carriers, which have been so magnificent, and the next generation of carriers. I'm in favor of maintaining our carrier forces, our carriers at full technological ability. Our carrier is the most important tool we have, in my opinion. The single most important tool the President and the American command structure has is an aircraft carrier. So I'd be in favor of making those the best we can make them. A lot to be said for having a design that was so superb as the Nimitz carriers. I don't know how many we got out of them, 12, maybe 10, 11 Nimitz carriers. And they're going to be with us for a while. They're superb weapon systems. I'd be in favor of upgrading the carriers. One of the things you get when you upgrade a carrier is you actually get a much smaller crew. I mean, the Nimitz-class carriers are 5,000 people. It's a city. And newer carriers mean you can do more automation, which means you've got a same carrier with the same capability. Instead of 5,000 people, you got 3,000 or 2,000. That's fewer people that you have to train, fewer people that you have to feed, fewer people that you have to pay, and it's also fewer people you put in harm's way. So I'll be all about maintaining aircraft carriers. I think the main asset for the United States Navy at this point would be the remarkable, astonishing success of the Aegis defense system. Aegis is a Doppler radar weapons control system that was originally put on cruisers. It's now on destroyers, and I'm pretty sure it's on frigates as well. The Aegis system is a computer-based system that works with a missile called the Standard Missile, Standard 3, I think, currently. And it is an air defense umbrella. A single Aegis platform, we call them a platform. I know a lot of people know this stuff, a lot of people don't. A platform is a floating vehicle. A ship is a platform. That ship can be a destroyer, can be a cruiser, can be a frigate, can be a PT boat, can be whatever. Aircraft carrier, it's a platform. And if you put the Aegis weapons control, fire control system on any floating platform that's big enough to power it and big enough to launch the weapons that are associated with the Aegis system, then you have got the most powerful and potent air defense and anti-ship force in the world. I have not been on a command center of a Aegis class vehicle, but I know friends who have, and they say they will take you in there, and without showing you the classified stuff, they basically show you the little standardized marker of a ship, little circle with a blue dot in it, and that's our guys. And that's the platform you're on. And extending out for a range that's probably between 1,000 and 2,000 miles sits a sensor umbrella, and if a bloody sparrow flies through that umbrella, we're going to know about it. And if we don't like the sparrow, we'll shoot the sparrow down. So my feeling is, as an amateur here, would be I'm in favor of more ships, and I'd be in favor of more Aegis-class platforms because these are constantly upgraded. The software is constantly upgraded. The Standard Missile is constantly upgraded. The Block 3 Standard Missile is now capable of shooting down incoming missiles. It is an anti-missile capability. Aegis cruisers, destroyers, and frigates are capable, they've done it in field tests, of shooting down incoming ballistic missile attacks to the United States. I'd have 500 Aegis platforms if I was the Secretary of the Navy and I had a budget. I'd have those damn things everywhere, and I'd upgrade them all the time. So there is a role for surface ships, and the more Aegis platforms you have around a carrier battle group, the better your chance of your carrier surviving. Another breakthrough technology that's happening right now is directed energy weapons, which are pretty much lasers at this point. If you've got an aircraft carrier that is an incredible asset and it is a big fat target and everybody wants to sink your aircraft carrier, there are really only two ways to do that anymore, and nobody's going to bomb your aircraft carrier anymore. The planes just won't get in close enough. The two primary threats to an aircraft carrier are a cruise missile attack, launched either from shore, from other submarines or other surface ships, or from enemy bombers. So we have really quite good missile defenses already. We have the Standard Missile thing, which patrol ships around the carrier in the middle, and there's a picket force, and they're tens or 20 or maybe hundreds of miles out. They're checking the sky with radar, and when an incoming missile comes in, the carrier doesn't shoot down the missile. The escort ships launch missiles to kill the incoming missiles. So far, so good. Anything gets through. Aircraft carriers have a point defense system called Phalanx, which is it's essentially a machine gun. It's a very, very high stream, very, very high rate of fire weapon system that puts out depleted uranium shells because you're going to hit this thing once, and it basically shoots bullets at an incoming missile, hits it, and blows it up. The problem with that is cruise missiles are cheaper than frigates or destroyers or cruisers. They're certainly cheaper than aircraft carriers, and cruise missiles are cheaper than the the standard missiles that are sent to shoot down cruise missiles. So the problem is, with one flavor of attack, is that you get a swarm. You launch so many cruise missiles at the carrier that you know that the defenses are going to take out a large number of them, but you overwhelm the defenses. You just flood the defenses, and you've got all your defensive picket ships firing off every standard missile they've got, and they're knocking these things down by flies. But if they send in one more than you've got on defenses, it's going to get through. Some of them, the Aegis can only defend against so many missiles. The Phalanx can only take out so many missiles. The game changer here could be these directed energy weapons, because one thing an aircraft carrier does is it generates a massive amount of electricity. Just 2 nuclear reactors, it puts out a tremendous amount of electricity. We're about 2 years away, I think, from being able to put anti-missile lasers on a aircraft carrier and on other ships too. If you had laser point defense systems in addition to the Phalanx, because I'm not taking anything off, I'm going to keep everything on, but if you had laser point defense systems, your engagement range is far, 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 far. There's practically to the horizon. Bullets have a limited range, but these lasers can hit guys 20 miles out. And furthermore, a laser is instantly guided to the target. It's self-correcting. Once it's on the target, second or two on that target, boom, it blows up. So you can engage far more incoming missiles faster and at a further range. You put 7 or 8 laser point defense systems on an aircraft carrier, and I'd be willing to bet you are immune to cruise missile attack, which takes care of half of the threat. The other half of the threat, of course, is the submarine threat. And the submarine threat, in my opinion, I'm an amateur, is a far more serious threat, because we have nuclear submarines. There's not a lot of nuclear submarines out there in the world. The Russians have the only other significant, sizable fleet of nuclear submarines. These are killer subs. We're not talking about the boomers, the ballistic missile subs that are designed to launch missiles and remain hidden. We're talking about attack subs now. Now, a nuclear submarine is a very powerful weapon, but they tend to be a little loud. The real problem is that we start to take a carrier battle group into shallower waters. Coastal waters becomes brown water navy, not the deep water blue water navy. As this carrier group gets closer to Iran, let's say, you start to worry about what are really old-fashioned submarines, diesel-electric boats. These are ships that run on boats that run on battery power. They have a diesel engine on the surface. Diesel engine charges the batteries, and the batteries run it underwater. It's no different than the U-boats of World War I. They don't have anything like the range or the speed of a nuclear submarine, but they sit there and wait for you to come into their range, and a electric boat is quieter than a nuclear boat. There are diesel-electric submarines out there that are quieter than our nuclear attack subs, and we got the quietest attack subs in the world. That's a problem. High-speed torpedoes that the Russians are developing is a problem. And lining your coastal waters with these essentially silent diesel boats is a big problem. If I was the Secretary of the Navy, since I was the Secretary of Air Force a moment ago, I would buy myself a lot of surface Aegis platforms. I'd buy a mess of them. I'd have them everywhere. I'd have them as a missile defense shield. The other thing I'd buy a lot of is I'd buy attack submarines. The preeminent U.S. attack submarine for 30 years now at least is the 688 boat, the Los Angeles class attack sub. And that thing is a remarkably good machine, but it's getting older. They developed a bigger, more expensive gold-plated class called the Seawolf class, which is probably the best attack sub in the world. But it's very expensive and very big. And my understanding is they made a compromise vessel, which is the Virginia class, which is a little smaller than the Seawolf. It's better than the Los Angeles class, but not quite as capable as the Seawolf, but very good sub. And I'd build, I don't know, if I was Secretary of Defense, I'd probably want 60 of those. I would want so many nuclear attack subs, hunter-killer subs of the Virginia class, so that I could put 20 of them with every American carrier group, not 10. Right now I think they normally carry 2 or 3. The best way to kill a submarine is with another submarine. Best way to detect another submarine is with another submarine. So when we send a carrier battle group into battle, we have all the surface ships, but also underneath them, further out in the pickets, we have our nuclear attack subs listening for, ready to detect, and ready to kill enemy submarines. And I'd like a bunch more. I'd like fewer holes in that net around the carrier battle group. That's what I would do. That's not as nuanced an answer, of course, as saying that there are boats that are ships that go under the water, or there are ships that other airplanes that land on, so I'm probably not qualified to be president of the United States. By the way, I'd be curious if anybody knows this. I know I'm completely geeking out now, but I don't care because I'm having fun. I've often wondered whether or not we have in inventory, this is one of those things I'd like to be pleasantly surprised about when I get to heaven, although I'm more likely to go to the other place. I would like to know if the Navy has, I've thought about this many times, I don't know why the Navy doesn't have onboard aircraft carriers and other surface vessels something like an anti-torpedo torpedo. This would be something that would be fairly short range, it would be very fast, and it would simply sit inside the hull of a surface ship, and when an incoming torpedo got within its engagement range, this thing would just swim out of a hole in the hull, and it would go right for that sound of that torpedo, which is, you're either going to pick it up on its high-speed screws, or by this point it's in its terminal phase, and it's pinging like crazy trying to find the target. And I would have a little torpedo just swim right out to that torpedo and kill it in the water. If that's not already on the drawing boards, I want to know why. That sounds like a damn good idea to me. Little things. And the nice thing about having little things is, if its chance of killing an incoming torpedo is 50%, and I've got 2 torpedoes coming my way, I'll send 40. Problem solved. Not so hard. It's nice to finally get a little payoff for all the years and years and years and years and years I read about this stuff and built all these models. It's just fun. It's cool to talk about. It's just amazing to belong to the country, the one country in the world that can do all this stuff. All right, so that's it. Two questions to end with, because we're way over time, and these are personal questions, and I can answer them very, very quickly. Dwayne Lively has written what is, without question, the simplest question I have ever taken on the Stratosphere Lounge. And he wants to know, Yeoman Rand, Deanna Troi, or Beverly Crusher? Is this a serious question, really? Honestly, Dwayne? I'm going to go through the motions of answering it because obviously everybody knows what the answer is and they know what the order is. It's Yeoman Rand, Beverly Crusher, Deanna Troi. It's Yeoman Rand. If I had a chance to have dinner with those 3 women, I would pick Yeoman Rand, and then I'd pick Yeoman Rand, and then I'd pick Yeoman Rand. This is a no-brainer. She was smoking hot. Beverly Crusher had kind of a nice sort of, milfy kind of appeal. Deanna Troi, you've got to be kidding me. Are you kidding me? We're the Federation's flagship. We're a research vessel, and we're a battleship, and we got photon torpedoes and phasers, and you've got a counsel, you've got a lawyer. You've got a lawyer sitting on the bridge. You're not even a lawyer. Even that's disgusting enough. But you got a lawyer, and he's not even saying, Captain, it's against the law to attack the ship because it's a violation of the ship. I sense a lot of conflict on the enemy vessel's bridge. Is that right? Wow. What are we paying you? And sure, I'm glad that I'm interrupting my command flow here, because while we've got all these other ships in combat mode, and I'm trying to concentrate on saving our lives in the galaxy and everything else, there's nothing I'd rather have than somebody telling me, I sense a lot of hostility on the enemy ship that's launching its photon torpedoes at you, Captain. Yes, I know that, Counselor Troi, because I can see the sparks flying and people are flying through the air. This is a clue that I'm able to determine, not being a betazoid. It's a clue that I got by watching the screen catch fire and this person's skin fall off from the last phaser strike that we took from this enemy vessel. That's a little clue that I got, that there's a lot of hostility on the enemy bridge. What a ridiculous show that was, please. Yeoman Rand, on the other hand, that chick, she was something. Yeah, she was something. Grace Lee Whitney had a very bad life. She went a little nuts, and I heard a lot of horrible stories about her after the show. She was so beautiful. And then I heard she just really lost her mind. And I don't know if it was alcoholism or insanity, but there were rumors of her just, like partying with entire football teams, and just not pretty. And she didn't look great in the movies. But Grace Lee Whitney, she was only in a couple episodes of the first season, and that little red velour thing with that ridiculous hairstyle. Oh my. Yeah, so it's Rand. And then Rand, and then Rand. Final question for the night. Ryan Muir, here's another good one. What's your favorite Samuel Clemens quote? Love his humor. I have 3 Mark Twain quotes on my personal page, which I never do. So, by the way, if you send me a friend request and I haven't answered it, it's because it's full, and the reason it's full is because I go to my personal page once every 3 months, 4 months. But when they ask for quotes, I put 3 quotes down. All 3 quotes are Mark Twain. So, My favorite Mark Twain quotes, these are the first three that I could find that I liked. Here's the first one. I thoroughly disapprove of duels. If a man should challenge me, I would take him kindly and forgivingly by the hand, lead him to a quiet place, and kill him. This is the greatest insult ever written. This is. Mark Twain said that just the omission of Jane Austen's books alone would make a fairly good library out of a library that hadn't a book in it. Just the omission of Michael Moore's movies alone would make a fairly good movie library out of a movie library that didn't have a single DVD in it. That's it. This is the all-time Twain quote for me. This is my favorite quote. This is Mark Twain in a nutshell. It's my favorite quote from, I think, I'm almost positive it's from The Innocents Abroad, which is one of my favorite books. In Paris, they simply stared when I spoke to them in French. I never did succeed in making those idiots understand their own language. That's my boy. That's my friend Sam. 2 minutes and 8 seconds, and that probably doesn't include the 20 minutes of turmoil that we faced once again. Once we got started, the bandwidth settled right down. I'm going to try as an experiment turning this thing on an hour in advance and seeing if that stabilizes it. I don't know. Maybe it just at 6:30, maybe something happens. Maybe people are checking the internet and maybe they just start falling off. I don't know what the answer is. I want you to know that we have tried. We can't get another cable into the building, but we're doing our best. You won't know that if you watch it on YouTube because once we got it going, it was a nice clean run, but we restarted this thing 4 or 5 times tonight. About lost my mind. That's the Stratosphere Lounge, episode number 18. And we always close the same way. We close by thanking you very much for your support on Facebook and support everything else for my amazing life and career. And I'll put the link up for the YouTube thing in the not too distant future. I read every comment I see on Facebook. I don't get to answer them all, and I appreciate every one of them. And again, if you submitted questions, you didn't get to them, I always feel awful about it. I feel like I should open the questions for 2.5 minutes because I always check and there's 60 or 70 and then, boom. Anyway, that's episode 18 of the Stratosphere Lounge, and we're going to have one more Stratosphere Lounge, and then hopefully the one after that we'll be able to talk about President Romney and a whole lot to say about a world where we've had a 4-year-old toothache that just won't go away and some sense that maybe it will. So thanks again for joining us. I'm Bill Whittle, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.